Good evening, everyone. My name is Darin Roodman. I will be your host today for this live AP European History Q&A session. I'm really glad all of you were kind enough to join us. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Media is sold. And we just would love you to think 5 more. What are we going to do today? Well, first, a short introduction for those of you that don't know me, and then we're going to go right into the questions. We're going to make it pretty, straightforward. First of all, who am I? I am Darin Roodman. I'm originally from Texas, but I live in Henderson, Nevada. I teach at a small private school, and I teach AP World and AP European History, as well as psychology. And we are here to answer any and all questions you might have about AP Euro. So don't hesitate to ask. We are here to help, we being the royal me. And also keep in mind that there is no such a thing as a dumb question. Any question you might possibly have could be valid, probably is valid, and may actually answer the question of someone else that's watching who's a little bit too nervous to ask. So you've got questions, I've got answers, let's do this thing. Anybody want to start us out? Okay, great question, Dan. Great question, Dan. Let's do this thing right now. Let's start answering. What's the easiest way to get analysis? So when you're talking about analysis, obviously you're talking about these sourcing points for the documents. And, well, you got a few options available to you. You can do historical, situation of the document. You can do the intended audience. You can do the point of view, and you do the purpose. Now, intended audience and point of view, intended audience and purpose tend to kind of mesh together. Say it's a stump speech by a politician. The intended audience is his constituents, and the purpose is to convince them to vote for him and that he's the candidate they want. But historical situation a lot of times is probably going to be the easiest way to get that hap or hip down pat, that sourcing point, because quite simply, talking about the historical situation of a document a lot of times is functionally at least a little bit available in the document itself, especially, if you talk about the description area right above the actual document content. A lot of times they'll give you at least the time frame, if not, a little bit about it. But that's also sometimes what you get. You can get like the intended audience stuff. But I'd say probably going to be the historical situation that's usually the most common one that people get points on. But yeah, that's what that is. So thank you so much, King Dan of Denmark. Anybody else? So glad to see a lot of people here. Also, let's take a look. Dan is on it. So what's the easiest way to earn argumentation point, and can you provide a sentence structure for it, please? So the argumentation point I'm going to take as the point you could possibly earn for arguing with your documents as opposed to just describing them. So as far as that goes, excuse me, thank you. So as far as that goes, what you're going to do is, so there's a really great metaphor that actually Steve Heimler uses. So I'm going to kind of gank that one. I've become quite friendly with him. Is the hammer and nail. So you take a hammer, you take a nail. If you're describing them, you say this is a hammer. It's made of steel, galvanized steel, and it has a pointy end and a flat side. The hammer is, your standard ball peen hammer. That's description. Argumentation is taking that hammer and driving the nail into a piece of wood. So it's taking the information from the document and using it to further your argument. So say, let's think, sentence structure. Basically, it can be as simple as, based on the information from the document, we could see that yada, 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 yada. So the argumentation point kind of goes a lot with your sourcing, if you think about it. Because right there, if you're doing the sourcing with the description of the document, you can then very easily blend that into, working with your thesis and thus your argument. I hope that helps. If you need more, let me know. Okay. Dan, I'll be with you momentarily. Where would the outside evidence go on a DBQ? And the short answer, Michelle, is anywhere except the intro and the ending. Even honestly go in the ending, really. Outside evidence is going to be something that you link usually with the document, right? But also just with the historical situation of the document or something to that effect, wherein you are talking about something that is relevant to your argument. So it's got to be related, right? But not readily on the documents, okay? So like talking about, so say you've got a bunch of documents about the 100 Years' War, right? And none of them, bad example. Say you've got a bunch of documents that cover the first French Revolution, and you got one document from some of the revolutionaries, another document from King Louis, another document from Marie Antoinette, and et cetera, et cetera. And you got a picture of the guillotine setup, et cetera. Say you also include information about, the changing of the calendar, right, to the French Revolutionary calendar. Well, that would be outside evidence that could potentially be relevant because it's not part of the documents, and you've worked it into, say, that first paragraph or that second paragraph within your argument. I hope that helps, Michelle. As far as Sarah PJ, regarding arguing with your documents, that's what he's talking about. Arguing with the documents is going to be those points, and if I remember correctly, argue with 2 documents, get 2 points. So it's pretty cool. All right, King Dan has been waiting. Let me see. I'm going to get to him momentarily. And get to him, and then we'll get to some of the others. Do appreciate you guys, providing questions. I really appreciate that. So more, please. Dan, of course, was talking about argumentation. So argumentation goes beyond simply describing your documents. It's taking that description and relating it to your argument. So sentence structure gets a little tricky because it's kind of dependent on your argument, right? So, say you're making this beautiful argument about the Industrial Revolution, right? And you've got this document about the use of the steam engine or steam-powered machinery in factories, and how the factories were growing as a place where things were made, as opposed to the cottage industry, right? Well, you could then take that document and use it to further your argument regarding the localization of industry away from the cottage style industry, where people would work in their homes and just be spread out wherever the people were living, to the metropolitan areas, to the cities where the factories were popping up. I do hope that helps a little bit more. Okay, how would you go about getting the final point for nuance and for deeper understanding the historical time frame, which thank you so much, Madeline F. So most people call that, in short, complexity. Complexity is a tricky thing, and there's no surefire way to teach it, to be perfectly honest. Complete brutal honesty. Complexity is one of those things that a lot of times kids either got it or they don't. But that said, all kidding aside, when readers are getting trained to read the actual, essays, they actually say you'll know complexity when you see it. Beyond that, there's no surefire way to do it. The short version of that is there's a lot of ways you can go about it. You can talk about, further events that your argument then led to, if it's a continuity sort of, like a CCOT, change in continuity over time argument, that is outside of the time period. What, after you've made your whole argument within time period, you can talk about the events that continued afterwards, which is kind of a neat thing to do. You can bring up a counter argument to your argument and then just take it apart with your argument, showing that your argument is the best option. What else can you do? You can use the opposite historical thinking skill to improve your chances of complexity. So say it's a causation essay, right? You could then talk about effects for greater nuance. What else? If it's a continuity question, you talk about change. If it's a change question, talk about continuity. If it's, let's see, CCOT, cause and effect. Can't think of that last one. Dude, it's blanking, sorry. Continuity, CCOT, causation, and it's on the tip of my tongue here. Cause effect. It'll come to me. Oof. Anyway, basically using the opposite historical thinking skill than what the question asks for can lead to nuance, deeper understanding, that complexity, special sauce, if you will. And also I will answer both Dan's question and Sarah PJ's answer / question momentarily. So that's how complexity works. It's a tricky one. And I mean, if you're going to pick and choose as far as, what points you're definitely going to get, leave complexity to the end. Not that you should leave it off until the end, but worry about it the least. Because of the 10 points you can possibly get, complexity is 1, right? So if you got to drop something, drop complexity, because you can still get a 5 even if you don't get all 10 points. So I hope that helps Madeline F. Okay, so Naomi LeBaron went and answered my question for me, but I appreciate you asking Maeve Chalk, I believe. The short version is we don't know. How many points are needed to pass for a 3, 4, or 5? Keep in mind, passing is a 3, 4, and 5. That will get you, college credit of some sort in most schools. You're very welcome, Madeline. So, and most schools will give you at least a college credit for 3. Some will give you like 2 whole, like 2 semesters worth of credit for a 5. So that said, we don't know. Unfortunately, the reason that we know, generally speaking, that, out of the normal 7-point DBQ, if you can score about a 4 or 5, you're going to pass as far as everything else, as long as everything else kind of stays consistent, is because that's on average what people have to get their 5-ish, right? Because they do curve it after the fact. Like, very few people get perfect scores. Like in the world test last year, of the 350,000 kids that took the AP world test, 2, literally 2, got perfect scores. Like actually perfect, start to finish, all the multiple choice, all the points for the SAQ, 6 points on the LEQ, 7 points on the DBQ, all of it, 2 kids. So, but a lot more than that got 5s, right? Yeah, Dang is right. Genius kids were just really good historical thinkers. So don't sell yourself short, Madeline. But I bet they are freaking fantastic, honestly, Naomi. And to be perfectly honest, you can get a 5 without getting a perfect score. And I want you guys to remember that. It's important to remember that, because doing your best can essentially get you that 5. Potentially, as long as you thesis contextualization, you argue with the documents, you describe the documents, you source the heck out of them, you can get a 5. So the short version is we don't know how many points you actually need. If I had to guess, and it's literally a guess, I admit this freely, of a 10-pointer to get a pass, you probably need at least 6 points. Do I know that for sure? Not at all. I admit this freely. I don't know. But that's my educated guess. All right, next up. Here we go. So King Dan came back to us. So could I say that this shows the steam engine contributed to the growth of industries and the decline in the cottage industry? Yes, that is absolutely true, and that would actually further your argument. Correct. My pleasure, Maeve. Afterwards, really. So Sarah PJ asked a really good question. So if you're working on complexity, right, and you decide to work with like events that continued after your argument and after the time period, do they have to relate to your thesis? Ideally, yes. At least they have to support your argument, in that it can't just be like factoid drops from later on, right? That would then, yes, it happened after and could be connected. But if you can't show that connection, that's not complexity. That's a factoid drop. And factoid drops, vocab drops, name drops of information don't get the points, right? So ideally, if you're going to keep the continuity going, or talk about effects that the causes you talked about happened after the fact, right? Like say the essays about 1750 to 1900, right? And then you talk about how all the stuff that you talked about led to World War I. Well, as long as it's related to your thesis, you could get the complexity point there. So that's awesome. Do I think it would be harder than previous years because it's one question and no other types? No. Short version, Sarah, no, I actually don't, and I'll tell you why. So Dan actually gave a nice little treatise on it. Thank you, Dan. But I'll give you the short version. I talked about this last week. I did a DBQ walkthrough last week here on Fiveable to talk about, would it be harder, should you be worried, things like that. And the short version of that is I don't actually think it'll be harder. And my pleasure, Dan. So the reason I don't think it'd be harder, and why the DBQ is actually the ideal thing that they could do if they're going to do anything, is because unlike the SAQ and the LEQ and even multiple choice, you don't have to pull information out of thin air, the back of your head, whatever. You don't. It's not a memorization game, and especially since it's open notes, which is huge. So since it's open notes, having all that information available to you is going to make your complexity better, your contextualization better, and your outside evidence, which is more better to call it additional evidence, really. Outside evidence is a weird term. Evidence outside the documents. I call it EBOD, evidence beyond the documents, right? Evidence beyond the docs is what I call that. And actually, Naomi, you're going to have time, and I'll explain why. So having all of that available to you, it'll definitely be on par to any other DBQ because it has to be, otherwise it loses validity, but I don't see it being harder. I hope that helps, Sarah. So I'm actually going to put, Naomi, your statement is a great statement. I'm going to put that right there in the questions box, and we'll talk about it. So next question from Aubrey M. Thank you. Am I right in assuming that the 100 Years' War isn't part of the history we might be tested on? You are incorrect, and I'll explain why. The history you're going to be tested on is basically the Black Plague to industrialization, basically 1200 to 1900. They can't test you on the century of conflict, which we also know as the 1900s and 2000s, the contemporary period, as it were, because they stated that. But the short version is that while technically it's going to be like so while officially it's going to be 1450 to 1914, the reality is that information from like the 100 Years' War and even the Black Death and the Renaissance are going to be helpful and is going to be helpful when setting up your argument. And the questions they ask might include the tail end of the 100 Years' War, right? So at that point, not knowing it could hurt you. Now, am I saying you need to, know everything? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm really not. You're going to be okay. So next question. I always struggle remembering the difference between conservatives, liberals, and what specifically they stand for. What are some ways to go about remembering them? Okay, that I'll be a pro at 100 Years' War. I guess know me, know each other. That's cool. So I wish I had you guys in my class. You guys are a lot of fun. Something to remember, first of all, is that the difference between liberals, conservatives, and royalists kind of comes down to understanding that it's not what it is today, right? Today, if you think about liberals, conservatives, blah, 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 a conservative is somebody that, probably votes for the GOP, the Republican Party here in the US. A liberal is somebody who sits on the Democratic side. Liberals tend to be more pro-social programming, whereas conservatives not so much, et cetera, et cetera. Liberals in history, however, are going to be those that are looking to liberate themselves from a monarch. Right? They're looking to advance democracy. They're looking to advance the people's voice. Liberals are more into liberté, fraternité, égalité, right? The three major items of the French Revolution. So liberals are looking to advance a parliament, a democracy, that sort of thing. Conservatives are trying to conserve the grand old standard. So that's the name, conservatives. They're trying to conserve the monarchy. They're trying to conserve the old ways. Liberals are to liberate us from the old ways. Conservatives are to conserve the old ways. I hope that helps. Okay, so Madeline asked a great question, and it actually goes right in with Naomi's question, which is notes. So, my pleasure, Naomi. So notes are a funky thing. Like, do you bring your entire notebook from AP Euro or even World or whatever with you to the test? The answer is no. And don't bring your book either. The reason is because with the book, you got to, thumb through it. You don't have that kind of time. Bringing your entire, book, your 2 4-inch binders, exactly. My students are on their like 4th or 5th, spiral bound. Dan, I will look at that momentarily, but it looks like a tasty thesis. Give me a minute. What I would do actually is look at the 7 themes of the course. So I'm gonna take a quick moment. I'm gonna stop this share for just a hot second, right? And the reason is like so. I'm gonna pull up the CED, which for AP Euro, which is available on the Googles, right? Give me 1 second. Boop-a-doo-boo. Do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. 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 Okay, so we go on the Googles, and we go AP, European History, CED, PDF, right? And the first thing that comes up is this PDF. Now, this PDF is important. I'll tell you why once it loads. So this right here is the course and exam description. There's one for every single AP course. It is perfectly available to any student that wants to find it onto Google's and on the College Board website. It's super helpful information. It's what all of us teachers base our entire course on, and it's functionally where the test comes from for all intents and purposes. So as we scroll through, because, you know, there's lots of pages, we eventually get to nope, I went too far. There it is. Cool. All right. So eventually we get to this lovely, lovely, lovely thingamajiggy. Let me focus this screen right here. Right, thank you, Aubrey, for that. Here you go. I hope that's a little bit better. I will also attach this link to the actual thingamahooby, but here's also the link just in case. I think it's the same thing that Aubrey just shared, so thank you, Aubrey. So these are the 7 themes of the course. Literally, it's what everything's divided into. And each theme has its own, you know, statement. You know, interactions of Europe and the world, economic and commercial developments, cultural and intellectual developments, states and other institutions of power, social organization development, national and European identity, and tech and scientific innovation. Great, wonderful. So what you should do, what I would suggest you do, and this is something that my friend Steve Heimler actually suggested also, there's a video of it on YouTube, is to take, you know, 7 documents, be it, you know, Google Docs, piece of paper, whatever. You can even just do it as 7 columns on a Excel spreadsheet, a Sheets page in Google, and set up each for one of the themes, okay? And then look at the illustrative examples. Very good, Dan. So yes, the theme would functionally be what we need to apply to our essays to formulate an argument. Exactly. So we've got these, you know, themes, and if you do each document in one theme, then as you go through the CED, and you should go through the CED to set up your notes, it's very helpful. Let's go. La 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 la. See, you thought this wasn't going to be interesting. So here we go. Italian Renaissance, topic 1.2, just for grins. So the thematic focus, as you can see, is cultural and intellectual developments, the CID, right? So we have all this information. And I would put what this actually means on the top of that document, just so that you kind of have that for reference. And here, on site is historical developments. It's stuff that happened. The Italian Renaissance, humanists, including, you know, Petrarch, promoted the revival in classics, et cetera, blah, 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 blah. Great. And then you can put down examples of this between knowing what the thematic focus is so that you know what to focus on when you're writing your essay. So since you've got 6, 7 documents, right, you read your question and you see, oh, this is a, you know, cultural and intellectual development type essay. You can ignore the rest of the documents and focus in on, boom, CID. Wonderful. And then you can talk about historical developments and just go, you know, as you're doing your notes, just go by the years and boom, 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 right there. And then bring in illustrative examples for your contextualization, for your outside evidence, and even as you just kind of develop your argument. So yeah, that, I hope that was helpful. So yeah, that's how you set up your notes. And that way, if you think about it, you know, especially if you organize them by theme and then time period within the theme, you'll end up having a really solid, you know, way to look at useful information without scrolling through everything, right? My students here in Henderson are required, I'm a little bit evil, I admit this. I require them to make a table of contents for their notes that I actually check for a test grade with some regularity, right? And so that table of contents has kept them organized for the entire year. It's evil in that they can get a 0 on a test grade if they don't keep it up. But yes, it does save them, and they do tend to appreciate it as long as they keep it up on a regular basis. But thank you, Naomi. You're making me feel good about myself. I'm not a fan of Cornell notes personally, King Dan. That's just me. I tell students to take whatever notes they want, and in any way they want. I am right there away from the Cornell notes as well. You know, thankfully, my school lets me teach how I like to teach as long as I follow the CED, so we're good. So that said, what was I saying? Right, so my students are already pretty organized to start with, so they'll be able to add stuff that we took notes on to their, you know, theme notes as they go. But if nothing else, using the themes as displayed here with the, you know, historic events and the illustrative examples will set you up for some solid complexity. As long as you can go link those all together with some, you know, cogent sentences, you should be okay. Okay, so Mr. King Dan was kind enough to share with us this lovely little thing. So although the Industrial Revolution continued to use colonization to increase economic profit due to the increased affordability in products and increased equality for both men and women, the Industrial Revolution often provided more change than continuity. That is solid. That is, you know what? That is a specific statement. It aims in a particular direction. It, you know, talks about the time period in question, and it takes a position and goes. So that's a solid thesis, actually, Dan. Well done. So yeah. So Spice T chart. Yeah, my pleasure. So the Spice T chart is really great. The way I kind of look at it is Spice T, HAP, Hippo, whatever you want to call it. All of the acronyms are super helpful, right? But they're helpful kind of specifically. Spice T will get you, you know, specific information. SOAP will help you work out a document. Optic will help you work out an image. HAP, Hippo, HIP, whatever will help you source. But if you're not like using all of the resources, you're kind of like spicy teachers. I like that. If you're not using all of those ways of looking at it, you can end up kind of like narrowing your focus, and you can end up really just kind of giving yourself tunnel vision so that you end up not being able to do that complex of an argument. So just beware of pigeonholing yourself into one thing. So yeah. So far, great questions. Thank you so much. So many of you are here, which is amazing, and you guys are just like chatting the heck out of the chat box, so thank you so much. More questions. What do you got for me? Anything is game. Please ask. I don't know why that particular tune's going on my head, but you know, hey. Hello, we have a question. Excellent. There we go. How many documents do we need to use to get full points? Madeline, how many documents do we need to use to get full points? And then another question will be from Mr. Dan next. So Madeline was up first. How many documents do we need to use to get full points? The answer is 4. So allow me to explain it up real nice for you. Use 5. Okay, allow me to elaborate. Technically, you can get full points if you explain, describe two documents, use two documents, and then use 4 documents total to further your argument, and then source 1 and 1. And then you have that's kind of how I roll, Naomi. So at that point, you only need technically 4. And if you've got, a point-worthy thesis, a point-worthy contextualization, you describe 2 documents effectively, you use the 4 documents to further your argument effectively, you source properly 2 documents, and then you end up with that magical complexity point, right? You've got 10 points. Wonderful. The reason I say, yeah, 4 is required, but use 5, is that what if you flub one of them? What if you miss one? Right? What if you describe 2 documents? Great. You use 4 documents for your argument, but you only effectively use 3. You don't get full points. You only get 1 of those 2 possible points because it's 2 and 2, right? What if you source 2 documents, but you only effectively source 1 of them? Exactly, like a backup. Precisely, Madeline. Well done. The idea is use all 5 documents for as much as you can. Source as many documents as you're capable of doing. The reason is because you're setting yourself up for success at that point. You're developing, you're setting yourself up so that if you swing and miss, at least you have another shot, right? That's a great question, Maeve. I'll be right with you. So that's how many. So technically 4 is required. I would use all 5. Next question, how do you structure the body paragraphs? What I would do is I would use, let's start with the intro paragraph and then we'll build to that, right? Intro paragraph is going to be your contextualization, which I always suggest it talks about the time period before, right? Talks about time period before the time period you're going to be arguing in, because talking about the time period during and talking about the time period after is better saved for sourcing your documents, and it's much harder to contextualize those two. So contextualize in the time period before, 50 to 150 years, give or take. Then slap a thesis in there, boom, first paragraph. Based on your thesis, right? And you're going to functionally be making like 2 major points in your thesis because you only have 5 documents, so that sort of thing. Use those major points as topic sentences for the paragraphs, right? So first body paragraph is topic sentence, argument using all the documents with description and sourcing and all that wonderful stuff and some outside evidence, and boom, and done, and yeah! Transition clincher, second paragraph, which is the topic sentence, using all the documents, sourcing documents, description, blah, 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 outside evidence, transition clincher, bam, yeah, and then conclude. And the reason I say conclusion, though it's not technically required, is because in the conclusion, you should restate your thesis in a different way than you used in the beginning. Because when the readers are reading your essays, if your thesis at the beginning swings and misses, they will immediately go right to the bottom of your essay to see if you tried it again at the bottom and got it. And a lot of times, you'll have an okay thesis at the beginning, but once you've actually developed your argument and you restate it at the bottom, it'll be a better one. I actually was grading one of my students' essays. I did a bunch of practice DBQs for my students over the past few weeks, and I was grading one of them, and his beginning thesis, the thesis at the beginning, wasn't wonderful. Right. So, Gabby, that's a really great point. It's a backup for the intro. Basically, yeah, that's accurate. That said, his opening thesis was okay, but it wasn't great. I went to the very bottom, and after he'd made his argument, his restating of the thesis answered the question much better, and I was able to give him the point. Does that make sense? So body paragraphs, topic sentence, documents, stuff, do it. All right. And frankly, Nomi, your conclusion is functionally restating your thesis. You're tying it up in a nice little bow, you know, in a fancier way, potentially. Yes, exactly, Madeline. Conclusion for a history essay is not the same conclusion as your English essays. Your English essays, a conclusion should be a nice flowery blah, 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 blah. Don't do that. We're not writing English papers here. We're writing arguments. We're historians. And so what I'm saying here is this. Your conclusion, which is just restating the thesis, ties up your argument in a nice bow because it's saying, see, my argument is valid. Give me all the points. So there's that. Recommendations for time management. Great question, Alexia. You recommend outlining before drafting. Personally, yes. I recommend outlining no matter what. And the reason's like so. It doesn't have to be a detailed outline, but having what documents you're going to use where, what documents you're going to use in what paragraph with like the topic sentences saves you from having to remember it on the fly. All of you, I'm sure, are absolutely brilliant. You're an AP Euro. You're succeeding in the class, especially considering all the Corona craziness, right? Good job, Dan, by the way. So I'm assuming, and I think I'm accurate when I just assume this, you're all brilliant people. But under pressure, you're far less brilliant than you actually are. The reason is because under stress, all of the brains in your head go out your ears, right? Dan, I appreciate you're in World History AP. I'm glad that you came to ask questions. I teach that too, and I encourage lots of my World students to attend these as well because they can be really helpful. And frankly, Euro and World tend to blend together a lot. Anyway, so yes, short version, Alexia. If you can jot down a quick outline, that'll make your life a lot better when you're writing your essay. So yes. Okay. If a document says the opposite of your thesis, how would you turn the document around to instead support your thesis? Well, first of all, Michelle, and that's a great question, you should not write your thesis until you've read your documents. And the reason is because if you write your thesis first, you are in danger of running into this situation where you have a document that says the opposite of your thesis. If you read all your documents and you come up with this thesis that you like a lot, and still there's one document that just doesn't quite work with it, you can use that to support the counter argument. Now we're talking about complexity here, right? So you can use that to support the counter argument that you would then demolish with your epic argument. But ideally, read your documents first, then write a thesis that works with all the documents that you've divided into sections. Great question, Michelle. Who we got next? Where should you put, okay, so Gabby Matt asked a wonderful question. Where should we put our complexity in the essay? Should it be in the intro? The short version on that is it should be everywhere. There's no one place to put complexity because ideally complexity is something you weave throughout the essay, showing a complex understanding, a nuanced understanding of the historical thinking skill, of what you're talking about, of your argument, of all of that lovely, yummy, special sauce that you do to do that voodoo that you do so well. So that said, complexity doesn't go into like ranch in a salad. Sure, more like barbecue on ribs. That fancy, right? So complexity should be kind of everywhere. So there's no one spot. And if you're only trying to shove complexity into one spot, it's usually not going to work for you. So try to weave a complex understanding of your argument in the documents and just like the historical thinking skill in general throughout your argument, and you'll do a lot better, Gabby. Thank you for asking. And yes, Naomi, that is a wonderful description. I love it. I'm there with you. So should you describe, support, and source each document made? If you had all the time in the world, absolutely. Because you don't, you should definitely describe and support with as many documents as you possibly can, ideally all of them, and source at least 3, right? If you can source all 5 because you're, just that good at sourcing, then awesome. Rock and roll with your bad self, snowman, okay? And if you knew my oldest daughter, that phrase would have made a lot of sense, but none of you do, so yeah. Anyway, basically describe, so basically, yeah, exactly what you're saying, Maeve. Do everything with some backup so that you can make sure to get the points. Set yourself up for success. If you do the basic requirement, there's a chance you'll miss. But if you do more, as with everything in life, if you do more than the basic requirement, you've got a better chance of succeeding and doing well. So yes, like I said. Where do we put the counter argument? Okay, so great question from Maeve again. Thank you, Maeve. You're bringing some great ones now. Where do we put the counter argument in the first body paragraph before we describe our document? Functionally, no, actually. Okay, so there's this wonderful formula for writing your thesis that was brought to us by the very venerable John Irish. John Irish is a world and I think European and APUSH teacher. On top of that, he's a published author about, writing AP history essays and things like that. He's amazing. But his formula, which some people really like to use, I got students that love it. I got students that don't use it at all, but it's a formula for writing a thesis. And it goes, and I'm going to put it in the chat box, but I'm also going to say it. So it's although X, A, and B, therefore Y, right? So although X, which is the primary counter argument to the argument you're about to make, right? Well, you could say this. Because of this thing that I'm going to do, which will be your first topic sentence, and this thing that I'm going to argue, which is your second topic sentence, therefore your argument Y. So that's where the counter argument can go. At the beginning, it goes at the very beginning in the first paragraph, with your thesis, it's thesis formula stuff. You should then kind of weave it into your essay so that it introduces that complexity, right? You're acknowledging the primary counter argument and then just destroying it bit by bit by bit, which is kind of neat. All right. Madeline asks a wonderful question. Before writing, would you write down or outline everything you can remember about the topics correlating to the documents, outside information before you begin writing? Basically, what you're saying is, what you're asking, if I'm understanding this correctly, would you write down all the outside information you can possibly think of related to the documents before you start writing your essay? If you feel you've got that kind of time, yes, because that way you don't have to try and remember it in the midst of your essay. However, if you've organized your notes according to what we spoke about, by theme, with historical events, including illustrative examples, at that point, you've got yourself, kind of that beautiful special sauce that you don't have to try and remember it or even, jot down everything. But honestly, since you're probably going to take a few notes on each document as you go, which is a good idea, as you're reading the documents, jot down what you understand about the document so you got it. If you want to jot down some outside information right there, boom, while you're, notating your documents, do it. For God's sakes, do it. Yeah. The more you can write down so that you don't have to try and remember it in the heat of the moment, the better. Am I going to be, well, thank you, Aubrey. Am I going to be part of the 5-hour review on the 12th? I believe the 12th is next Tuesday. I am actually hosting a psych stream for an hour between 5 and 6 or 8 and 9, depending on your time zone, on the 12th. Beyond that, I have not been asked to, but I might jump in. It just kind of depends. I'd be more than happy to if they would like me to, but I appreciate the question. I'm very flattered. I actually am a very new streamer to Fiveable. I've only been doing it for 3 or 4 weeks at this point. So the fact that I'm able to come to you guys and help you out, it's a pleasure for me. I really enjoy doing it. So thank you for asking. Okay. So great question. Great question from Ethan. Ethan, I think you were actually at my stream last week, weren't you? So should documents be sorted based on whether they support A or B? The short version is yes, actually. You want to sort your documents into basically the 2 points you're going to make, because that way you have a better chance of making a cognizant argument. Functionally, you're going to have 2 body paragraphs. You're going to have your introduction, your 2 body paragraphs, and your conclusion, right? Your 2 body paragraphs are going to be the 2 parts of your argument. So you can't just chuck whatever document in it and hope it makes sense. You should definitely sort your documents based on what argument what part of the argument they fit into. Say you're talking, social change in the French Revolution, just because, it's a big topic in Euro. You got documents talking about, the removal of the church from power, and then more documents talking about the Killer Conga line, aka the terror. Having, the documents that fit with, the de-religiousification, and then the documents that fit with the terror works far better than, just chucking some of the terror documents in with the de-religiousification. It doesn't really work that way. So yeah, grouping arguments is documents super helpful, and actually, if you group them, it makes your writing your thesis a lot easier. And Maddie and Gabby definitely, do that. It's a good idea. So Michelle's asking a question: is it okay if you use although X and A, therefore Y? So functionally, if I'm understanding your question, you said although the best counterargument and this point, which will probably be displayed in one of the documents, I have this argument. So I would suggest kind of altering that just a little bit, in that you could use although X and A, B, therefore Y. Because remember, your thesis should be specific, right? It has to have specific information. The more specific it is, the more detailed it is, the better a thesis it can possibly be. So yeah, there's that. Ethan, I think you were in my stream last week. I think if I'm remembering correctly. Thank you so much. If it is you, thank you so much for coming again. I appreciate it. Any other questions in our last 5 minutes together, folks? I really appreciate you guys asking all these wonderful questions. You've asked 26 amazing questions, and I've had a blast. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you. I'm glad I recognized you by your emoji thingy avatar and your name, so go me. Considering how horrible I am with names, that's kind of impressive. Ooh, can I tell you my favorite joke, Naomi? Yeah, I will. It's kind of a shaggy dog, though, so it might last a little longer than the 5 minutes. So a bus full of the ugliest people in the world crashes and everybody dies. And they all go up to heaven, to the pearly gates, and St. Peter is there getting ready to check them in. It's a line, miles long, because it's a bus full. Before he gets started, St. Peter says, you know what, guys? It's been a good day. The big man's happy. I'm ahead of on my quota. I'm going to grant each and every one of you one wish for eternity. Anything you want short of returning to Earth, it's yours. Now, buzz goes through the crowd. Oh my gosh, like anything we want, anything at all. Oh my, wow, I don't know what to do. So finally, St. Peter gets started. First guy in line says, I can have anything I want, anything at all. St. Peter says, besides going back to Earth, yeah, you can have anything at all. Says, I wish to be beautiful. I wish to be glowing, radiant, handsome. I've been ugly my entire life. I've broken mirrors. I've scared cats. I've, made old ladies faint. I want to be attractive. St. Peter says, that's what you want for eternity? He says, yes. Boom, done. He's radiant. He's beautiful. He's the most attractive thing you could possibly think of, and he walks into that. The next person in line says, oh my God, that's a great idea. When they come up in line, they ask for the same thing. They want to be beautiful, radiant. Boom, done. Now, as the people are making this exact same wish, beautiful, 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 and Peter's just boom, 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 just making it happen every time. If he wasn't St. Peter, his fingers would be just wearing out and snapping his fingers so much. The guy in the very back of the line starts laughing, starts giggling. And as people keep making this wish, he's laughing harder and harder. More and more people make this wish. More and more, he's just laughing, laughing, laughing. Finally, second to last person in line makes the wish. I want to be beautiful. St. Peter snaps his fingers. She's gorgeous. Into heaven she goes. Finally, we get to our last guy, our Joker. St. Peter says, so, what do you wish? The guy says like this. Hold on a second, Peter. Hold on. I'm going to be right with you. Just I can wish for anything. Yeah, anything you want. Anything at all. Anything. Short of going back to the Earth, anything you want. I got this. And they all wish to be beautiful. Yes. What do you wish? Come on. You got to get going. I wish they were all ugly again. That is the ugly bus joke. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much, guys. I do appreciate you guys playing along. Any last minute questions before we go? Thank you, Perla. Thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, all of you. It's been an absolute pleasure streaming to you guys. You guys asked some amazing questions. It's been great. If there's anything I can do, please feel free to reach out. This will be available for rewatch, and basically, from what I understand, eternally. So yeah, hit it up whenever you want. It's my pleasure. Naomi, Maeve, Michelle, MC, Gabby, King Dan, Madeline, Perla, Aubrey, ... Ethan, thank you for coming back. I hope I didn't forget anybody. You guys have been great. You've asked some phenomenal questions, and I really, really appreciate that. And thanks so much for playing along for this last hour. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.